state and the laws of the town of Mount Airy.
of this state and the laws of the town of Mount Airy.
All right, great.
All right. Cool.
And you are all now stuck with 5 years.
I would go in the planning commission scrapbook.
Well, I did a video.
So,
Thank you.
Do you have your keys?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, I can grab them.
Which one?
Good job.
One's A. Yep.
Well, and for that matter, and maybe even copy the individuals, they might want a copy of it.
Oh, that's my, hopefully.
Fourth to order. Let's begin with a pledge to allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, excellent. Okay. The folks had a chance to look over the minutes from the last meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I move to approve.
All right,
I'll second.
all right. It's been moved and seconded that the minutes of the March 27th meeting be approved as submitted. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. The minutes are approved. Okay. Now it's time for any citizen comments for items not on our agenda tonight. Anyone sign in or anyone have something that they wish to share? Got a... It's a race.
Executive privilege. Who's on it?
We on? Yep. Okay. Larry Husher, I'm the mayor of Mount Airy. I just wanted to come up here. We all know that there's a charrette coming up in the May timeframe. And I sent this email to all the commission members, but I'm going to read it out for anybody in town who is interested in participating in that. The charrette will occur, and we're going to have note takers at the tables. And we're looking for those people who would be willing to be note takers at the table. So my email read as follows. We are looking for about 10 note takers for the upcoming charrette involving the Beck property. This is obviously a huge project. This charrette is an opportunity to provide input and make sure we are getting something beneficial for our town. It is a direct and civil engagement opportunity with the developer and the town. Your function as a volunteer would be to take notes at the different tables as items and thoughts are discussed concerning the development. You could volunteer for one or both days, the first or second day. There is a third day, but the last day is more of a wrap-up, so your services will not be required for all 3 days. Including in this, there will be a Zoom meeting with Cecily Bedwell of Design Collective in early May to further discuss the role and offer some training as to what is expected. So if you're out there and you're listening and are willing to volunteer, please send an email to the mayor or call Town Hall. And those charrettes, Saturday, May 20th, and May 22nd, which is Monday. That's day 1 and day 2. Okay, and let me see if I got the times down here. So on 6 to 7 on Monday, and I believe, is it 6 to 7 on Saturday as well?
2 to 5.
2 to 5. 2 to 5 on Saturday and 6 to 7 on Monday. Okay, so thank you. If you're willing to help out, come on out and be part of this. It's at the American Legion. Thank you.
I think it's 6 to 7 and then it's 9. I have to look at I don't have it in front of me.
All right. I did that very thing when we did, and Design Collective was involved when we did the downtown master planning charrettes, and very, very interesting, and it was very useful to be in on the, go from table to table and monitor the discussions. Yeah.
I do have the times right here real quick, and I'll just reiterate them. So May 20th, 2023, we're 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. at the American Legion
Okay.
On Prospect. May 22nd, 2023, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. May 23rd, 2023, 2 to 6, and then 6, 7 to 9.
That's what I thought. Okay. All right. Cool. Okay. So if you're interested in that, or you know someone who might be, let them know. It's also on, it's on the town website. Okay. Very good. All right. And another comment?
Thank you, Planning Commission and Chairman Bill.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Dave Pyatt, 705 Park Avenue. I wanted to talk about some things that I was sort of doing with the blessing of the Planning Commission to come up with the criteria so that you can get a feel for how much water is of it. You know, it's APFO in general, but what are the water situation when you come to the pre-concept phase? And it's fairly complicated. I just wanted to point out, I lived through the drought of 20 years ago, and I was like all of you. I knew very little about hydrogeology. I was an engineer. But I took a graduate level course on applied hydrogeology, and I would just like to pass this book around so you can feel how heavy it is, and it's full of mathematical formulas. There's two ways of calculating water availability. One is the textbook solution using wells and mathematical formulas to calculate how much yield you can get from that particular aquifer. And that's typically what applicants have done. And because of the drought and the fractured rock situation we have with so-called fractured rock aquifer, the MDE is the one that gives you the final appropriation, and I think everybody gets that. They have their secret formula for how they calculate water availability. I've sort of cracked the code to some extent. They do some with the textbook method, but their primary strategy, if you will, is to calculate what acreage you have, how much of that acreage is captured by the building footprint. So how much rainwater is available to get into the ground, irregardless of what the wells are, how many wells, whether you have 5 wells or 10 wells. But they're hesitant to tell you what their formula is, I think, because they know then all the developers will, come right up to that limit. So they kind of keep that to themselves. When I was still,
Let's wrap it up.
okay, when I was still on the council, it was about 2 to 1. But looking at the Beck situation with the amount of what they call the building footprint, when I talked to the MDE staffer who was hesitant, I got the feeling you're going to get very, very little water from the Beck property because of the nature of the cluster development, and whether it's a good aquifer or not doesn't really matter. You're really blocking the rainwater from getting there. So the only thing you can do is to cut down the footprint of the building, and which means fewer houses, and that's also less demand. So that's the only way you're going to meet that. And the problem is you don't know that until you go to MDE for an approval, and they usually take 18 months. So you could be 3 years away from getting a feel for what the allowable water is. So, I'm just, somehow you have to figure that out.
Good.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments anyone wish to make before we move on with the agenda? Okay. Then let's hear from our planners. Is Hannah here tonight? Yeah, there she is. I didn't see you back there.
There we go. Welcome. I'm not sure your name. Welcome to Planning Commission. My name's Hannah Weber. I work for Carroll County Department of Planning. Just some updates from the Planning Department this month. We are bringing the triennial update to the Carroll County Water and Sewer Master Plan to our Planning Commission on May 16th. There we will be hopefully forwarding that to our county commissioners. We are still working through our Transportation Master Plan. That is still going through Planning Commission meetings. Our hazard mitigation plan is looking for county commissioner adoption. This has been an ongoing process with the state, and we just got approval from them to send it forward in our process. And then lastly, the economic development study. We are having our second public workshop this Thursday, April 27th at 5 p.m. at Exploration Commons in the city of Westminster. This is the second one where we seek public input on where they see the pros and cons of economic development in the entire Carroll County, where they would like to see it, where they don't see it, things like that. And this is the second one, and I believe this will be the last technical workshop, but of course it's part of the master plan, our master plan process, but the actual study will have lots of time for public input. But I believe this is the last public workshop that they're calling it. Is there any questions?
All right.
Chairman, quick question. Hannah, on the hazard mitigation portion of the master plan, is that and again, we're in the master plan process ourselves, and so that doesn't ring a bell as one of our required chapters. Is that a chapter that's invoked strictly within Carroll County, or is that something that you've added?
That is something we have to do for the state level, but all of the information we get from the towns.
I gotcha.
That we put in, kind of like compile it all from the municipalities into one plan that we send to the state.
And just some examples, when you say hazard mitigation, I'm looking at, is that like accidental toxic waste dump?
Flooding, fires, hurricanes.
Disasters?
Yeah, disasters. Pandemic was a new one we had to add.
Super.
Yeah.
all I had.
But yeah, it basically, if you don't plan for it, if you don't have it in your hazard mitigation plan, it's harder to get money when those disasters do happen from the state level.
And we did work with town staff did work with
Yes.
Carroll County
Yep.
with that plan.
Yep, so be seeking county commissioner adoption. Still trying to schedule time with them as they work through their budget.
Hannah, I should know this, but I don't. Is there a master plan that's done periodically, every 10 years, 15 years, at the county level?
Our county master plan, correct. We're in the beginning process. The economic development study is kind of like our kickoff to the master plan, but we're hoping to have it by 2025.
Okay.
So 2014 was our last one, so 2025.
Periodically, during that process, if you could give us just an overview of where you're at.
Yeah.
Especially anything that may have pertinence to Mount Airy,
Absolutely.
that would be very useful.
Yeah, right now it's the economic development study, and then, go from there. All the different chapters that you guys are very familiar with, going through your process.
Okay.
And also I'll go back to the transportation master plan is also coinciding with that as well, going through all of the county plan major streets and connections, what we see as useful, what we see as may not be that feasible in today's time with development and things. But again, that's all working with the towns.
Good.
Yep.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Your turn. Frederick County's turn. Hey, Justin.
Good evening, planning commissioners. In Frederick County.
Mike, a little closer.
Sorry. Gordon Mills did receive its preliminary subdivision approval for 435 single-family lots and 175 townhomes. It also received site plan approval for the 175 townhomes, and that's near Newmarket. Frederick Leadership Frederick County, Frederick Future Day. Leadership Frederick is an educational community leadership program of the Frederick County Chamber of Commerce. We held a long-range planning, communication, outreach, placemaking, and events on planning exercise to educate people who were unfamiliar with planning. And then Sugarloaf was one of our plans that we're working on. It has one more workshop session on May 17th. Before the next meeting after that, it will have a public hearing. South Frederick Corridors is another plan that we're working on. The plan is in 60-day review, and we're working on setting up public engagement for that process. And then just the other documents that I've provided with you guys. The first one is a document from our 2019 master plan. It just shows where anticipated growth is. Most of it is south of Frederick in the South Frederick corridors, along 270, and then along the CSX Mark rail line. And then everything else is considered secondary growth. And the other document that I provided, it's a sort of a dated document. It's from October, but it's the residential pipeline. I'm working on updating this quarterly. I'm still waiting on some documents from other municipalities, but all this information will be posted on the county website. It is on the planning and under planning and data and maps. There's also an interactive ArcGIS web map, so somebody can just go on it and zoom, and that will also be updated eventually along with the pipeline.
In terms of growth area, the greater Linganore area is substantially larger than it was a few years ago. I had no idea it was growing that fast.
Yeah, most of the growth is, they're trying to get most of the growth away from that area. It's not considered a major growth area. I know there was a lot of pushback with the latest Gordon Mill plan, which is in that region.
Mm-hmm. Well, for the past 20 years, the majority of the growth in Frederick County has been in the southeastern sector, with some proximity to Mount Airy. That's a bit of a concern for us, and it remains so. Okay?
Can you go over where the Gordon Mill area is again for me? I know it's Newmarket, but there's a lot of community growth area around Newmarket. There's also a growth area around Mount Airy, just on that little tip of town there. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you explain any of that to me?
I'm trying to find it on the map. Gordon Mill, I know did change its name. That's the one issue with the pipeline is everything constantly is getting renamed, so this document is a little hard to
Do you know
find.
which number it is?
I believe it's number 14.
I see 14, I see it.
Letton Linger property?
It's right above Linganore.
And that property is listed on this map as 475 units. I know they did take some away for the final approval of that.
All right.
My question real quick, Bill, back to Brian Beta's question. So what is the population of Newmarket? Do you know, out of curiosity currently?
I don't know off the top of my head.
I don't know if that's on the one chart or not. So I'm just wondering, the Mount Airy dot is one size, and the Newmarket dot is half that size. So I'm just wondering if the Newmarket should be a much larger dot in comparison, by the way it's growing. And I also wonder what a suburban retrofit is. Is that a priority funding area as well, or a growth area?
Those are all considered secondary growth areas.
Okay.
The main focus of the whole livable Frederick is to really push everything into where the
Corporate
the
limits.
primary funding, or the primary growth area is, and that's really like the intent of the whole livable Frederick is to push everything in retrofit through the South Frederick corridors and in some of the transit-oriented development along the rail spot in 270 as well. And everything else is just secondary growth.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or feedback to Justin? All right.
This is helpful.
Thank you, sir. John, I think next on the agenda is,
Right. So again, we are here today for the final site plan approval of the Mount Airy Medical Eye Center, S20-0031. The applicant, Dr. Boaz Schwartz, is here, along with his engineer of record, Ron Thompson. Again, we are looking for a final approval from the Planning Commission for the site, God bless you, site development plan to move forward. I'll pass it on to Ron Thompson for him to present his site plan.
Thank you, John. Again, Ron Thompson, Van Mar Associates. The site is located at the end of Ridge Court, adjacent to State Highway, behind Dr. Andrews' place, for point of reference for everybody that in the town that would know that. So it basically doesn't. It does abut State Highway with an access onto Ridge Court. So it is going to be Dr. Schwartz's home office as soon as it can get built for it. We have all of our approvals from the county, both stormwater management, grading, building permits for accessibility, landscape, forest conservation. So again, as John mentioned, we're here tonight for, been a long journey for Dr. Schwartz for final site plan approval. And we have the details of the signage in the plan. You've given the rendering of the building, and I'll answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Thompson, you said that it's his home office. Are you living there as well, Dr.
No,
Schwartz?
I'm sorry, by home office, it will be his business.
Okay,
Right
just-
now,
it's
he
just
is
his business
renting,
His office is over in the Twin Arch Center, correct? Oh, you're on Center
he
Street?
got, there was a change, he wasn't able to renew his lease,
Okay,
thinking this would move faster.
okay,
So he's had to relocate into temporary quarters.
I was going to say, it's been a few years.
yeah.
So now this will be his, once constructed, his office,
Okay.
place of business.
When was the previous building taken down? How long ago? Last March?
No, it was,
Yeah.
yeah, the demolition of the existing resident. Was it March of last year or the year before? Because,
I think it was of the year
Been-
before, and that's why there had to be a text amendment for this property,
3
because.
years before you can go over 2,000 square feet?
no, the building sat empty for 5 years prior to then receiving the special exception to have that increased square footage.
Okay. And then it talked about possible tree removal. I didn't see that, where that would be done.
So it's a very unique situation because the drive to his new building, there's some existing evergreens along the edge of the road. And it's indeterminate which property owner currently owns them, if it's the Cowboy or if it's within our right-of-way. So those will have to be elevated to meet 12-foot clearance for the fire trucks, or they'll have to be removed and replaced with a smaller shrub at some point.
There are also some existing trees within the site and right along the boundary with State Highway. Those are being replaced with new landscaping.
The other thing is kind of a comment. This is zone neighborhood professional. Maybe it's just me, but, looking at that, I don't know how that meets the spirit of looking like it's in the neighborhood in Mount Airy.
So again, this was approved by the Planning Commission for this elevation exactly. So this was approved by the Planning Commission prior to you becoming on board. This is similar to what was existing there, the existing residence.
Yeah, just picked it up.
It was a very funny-looking
boxy type of
shed-style roof with that type, same pitches. And again, this was brought in front of Planning Commission for approval for this elevation to move forward within the NP and was granted approval.
Chairman, I have a couple questions. In reading through the staff analysis, first off, welcome Dr. Schwartz and your family to this evening's meeting. As I understand it, there's 3 things that are going to have to be cleared through the county agencies. We've already spoken about the tree trimming, making sure that's done. We've talked about a stormwater deed that has to also transpire. And then lastly, I believe the county will verify that the prior residents' water and sewer lines are capped. So those are 3 things that just kind of come out as those things are among the things that the agencies will approve prior to a PWA and moving forward.
Actually, it is the town that will require a stormwater management deed of easement be recorded along with the PWA.
Okay.
It doesn't go back to the county.
Okay.
The county has given us final stormwater management approval. So when the PWA is approved by the town council and then is executed, signed in the bond, letter credit place, there will also be a deed of easement that will be required to be submitted to the town to be recorded with it. So we don't have any more items to go back to the county on. The capping of the water line is a town improvement. So that's done under the town engineer
Okay.
inspection.
Gotcha. And then the last question with regard to the water requirement for the business, it's listed as 266 gallons per day, I believe. And so that was reviewed. If Barney, I don't mean to put you on the spot, that's within the commercial allocation that we have.
They've received an allocation
Right.
through the town already
Right.
for this property.
Gotcha. Okay, super. That's all I had. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or feedback? Motion to approve.
Sorry. I just had a question about the sign. You said it's on 3 of 10, but it's on,
I can barely hear you.
oh, the sign. Oh,
Signage for the,
okay, okay.
Yeah, there's an entrance sign, and there's also a sign on the front of the building.
Is that the sign?
You can't barely see it in the elevations, but it's right along the front
Yeah.
here. It says Mount Airy Eye Medical Center, or Medical Eye Center.
Okay, so is that the,
It meets the
sign?
requirements for the.
I'm just curious, is
sign
that the
ordinance.
only sign you're going to have?
And there's an
And
entrance
there's a
sign.
monument
Okay,
sign
okay,
out
that's what I was,
because
okay.
the site is located to give visibility to people driving down
Great.
27.
Okay,
okay,
I'll make a motion.
all right, go ahead.
I move that we recommend approval of the final site plan for 1401 Ridge Court, subject to the following conditions. All town and county reviewing agency comments must be addressed before submitting the final site plan Mylars, and the signed Public Works Agreement be approved and signed by all parties, and bonding for the project needs to be in place, including reference to the right-of-way, future widening, and sidewalk.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. And it passes. All right, very good.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
It's been a long journey. It's going to accelerate. As soon as we can get the PWA approved, he'll be trying to get that back in, plan signed, so we can start construction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vote 5-1, right?
Okay,
One of the applicants come up as well. Next up is AP 230009, Twin Arch Business Park, Lot 14B. It's an amended plat located at 2302 Backacre Circle, Mount Airy, Maryland. This is the amended plat that will have to occur prior to the concept site plan being brought in. So let's go ahead and move forward on this. So this is a unique situation. So currently, the owners own 15, Lot 15. They also own 14A. They're taking portions of 15, the remainder of Doc Full's property, and adding to 14A, creating 14B. And I could have swore, thank you, Barney. It's really tough to see. I thought this was, came through with a copy, but there's a rhombus up here that sort of is an additional acreage that's going towards Lot 14A. And I'll
Mr.
let-
Breeding, could you
Yes.
expand the picture? By the
Sure.
mic? Zoom in.
My eyes aren't working very well today for some reason because of the allergies.
there we go.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Too much. There we go. Perfect, perfect.
I have a laser pointer in here somewhere.
So the original lot was on the right side.
Yeah, so if you look at these Zs right here, see the Z there and the Z there, the original lot line for 14A was right here. And 14A became in when 15 added some property. 15 used to have a right-of-way from, 1 second, Ron. So 15 used to have a right-of-way from Backacre Circle that went back to the lot 15. So it had multiple entrances. When 16A got modified, that driveway got put into this, and then this lot line got transferred over and created 14A, which is basically right there. 14B, amended site plan for lot 14, has been expanded by increasing basically that shape there. Looks like a hatchet, maybe. But I will relinquish to the applicant and to Ron Thompson.
Again, Ron Thompson, Van Mar, thank you. This is part of the 14A and 14B, once this gets recorded. What you'll see is that within this area will be microbial-retention facilities for treating stormwater management for Lot 14A. One of the other elements is that the floodplain, as a condition of the recordation of this plat, amended plat, would be extinguished. And Carroll County has approved that extinguishment. It really is kind of a leftover element that serves no purpose. All of the drainage now within the park is captured within a storm drain system, which connects to the proposed large sand filter near Brittany Manor there. That's still to be completed.
Okay.
Could you clarify, you said Carroll County just approved something?
Carroll County approved, one of the things that we had, approvals we had to go through under floodplain management was that they approved, rather than doing something separate to extinguish the flood, this portion of the floodplain easement
Okay.
with the recordation of this plat. The floodplain actually continues on in the Brittany Manor open space and wetlands and forest conservation area. So this one has a large culvert underneath Backacre Circle. Nothing backs up or floods to it.
Thank you.
And what do you hope to be the purpose of the expanded area?
The expanded area, what you'll see in the concept plan for 14, is that we are placing 3 microbial retention facilities for stormwater management, to treat stormwater management for the development on what will become, with this approval, 14B. And that would be a flex industrial building.
Okay, all right. Any other questions or feedback?
Chair, I just have one question here for you, more of a comment maybe potentially. Have we received any letter from the applicant stating the extinguishing of the floodplain yet? Because one of my questions was, does another county or state have to give approval prior?
Yeah, we do have written approval from Carroll County, and I have spoken with them verbally about
Okay.
this situation.
All right, I'll just verify, making sure that, okay, cool, thank you.
Okay.
The staff is recommending approval of the amended site plan, or amended plat, excuse me, for 14B Twin Arch Business Park, subject to the following 2 conditions.
Okay. Motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I make a motion that we approve the amended plat for Lot 14B of the Twin Arch Business Park, Section 4, following the 2 actions, subject to all town and county review and agency comments being addressed prior to the Mylar submission. And secondly, that we extinguish, or the extinguishing of a 100-year floodplain is shown on Plat Book 52, page 296, with the Maryland Land Records as part of the amended plat.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
So next up, one second.
All right. Twin Arch Park Lot 14A.
The next up is Lot 14A. Deborah's asking me if it should be 14B or not. I'm
B or A?
indifferent. I mean, currently, it's a concept plan, so we can fight about that later. Ron might have something to say about it, but anyway, so this is S220035, Twin Arch Business Park, Section 4, Lot 14A. Again, this is concept site plan development for approval. This is a 22,400 square foot interior floor space. This has 2 floors, and I'll pan through the plans here in a second. This is a flex industrial use, and it has existing water. Excuse me. Excuse me. Again, this is in the S1 and W1 existing final planned water sewer area. This is 2 floors, as I was saying. Let me pan through here real quick and. All right, Ron, I'll go ahead and kick it off to you.
Thank you. Again, Ron Thompson, Van Mar. Right now, it's 14A. With the recordation of the plat, it becomes 14B. So the final site plan will say 14B.
Thank you.
At that point. Again, as John mentioned, it's a 2-story flex industrial building. When you're driving along Backacre Circle, it looks like 1 story, and then the lower level is accessed from the back of the building for it. We talked earlier about what are we using that additional acreage for. You can see the 3 microbial retention facilities. Here we actually have concept stormwater management approval, and the letter actually says final, but we'll still send it back through the process. Just a couple notes, and we'll get to that when we get to the conditions. But the building is actually 42.25 feet. The overall height is around 47, maximum height 45, but per the code, the building height is measured to the midpoint of a gable roof. So that brings it down to 42 feet on it. And the other thing is that the site has, I want to make sure I'm not poking Tom with the red dot here. Although not labeled, there is a fire hydrant right here about 80 feet from the building, and another one over here about 250 feet from the building. So when we get to those conditions, I'll make a comment on them. Beyond that, I guess we're open for any questions you may have. Again, it's concept. We'll be back for final, hopefully soon.
Okay.
Maybe early summer.
Mr. Thompson, is this the building you guys were going to build, you had all the steel for? Or is this another building?
No, that is lot 15.
Lot 15, okay. Got a lot of lots over there. So this building is going to be for storing equipment, heavy equipment, or what?
No, it'll be a rental type of flex industrial building,
Okay.
is what,
Would rent the units to store the?
well, they can rent, have a office up above. I've put in for water and traffic as office, a little bit more heavy, just in case people wanted to rent an office in there as part of their business.
Okay.
There could be storage, there could be light industrial, like you have the counter manufacturing, light industrial, you have a counter place up on Backacre Circle, those types of activities.
Okay.
This actually represents the last lot within the Twin Arch Business Park. The other lots, the others are about built out, two still waiting to get under, the buildings under construction due to rising interest rates and steel prices.
Mr. Chair, may I? I just like to go last if I'll let the normal commission members go first, but it looks like they're trying
The
to.
normal ones?
Yeah, since don't normally vote unless there's a tie, you all are the normal voting commission members, so I'll let.
Thank you, Carl.
You're welcome. I do have a couple comments for Mr. Thompson. As like, if anyone's wondering this, was wondering if there was something similar to this that's already in Twin Arch. There is. It's the building where the Carroll County Nursing School used to be a couple years ago across the street, you know.
Right, yeah.
So there is a
The one
similar.
next to Goddard School.
Yeah, there's a similar use with, you know, office above and then flex or rental space above with garage doors. But I do have one question regarding the lighting plan on it, Ron. I just would like some clarification. Maybe I'm reading it wrong. I'm not the expert on reading the photometric plans here. But as normal, the poles, page 8 or 6, I mean, you got it? Okay. Down on the left-hand corner, it says mounting heights, poles 20 feet, wall packs 15. And then around the building, I might be reading it incorrectly. If I am, I apologize. It says, say, wall pack 3, MH 20. Is that the maximum height, or is that the height?
MH is mounting height.
Okay. But is that a wall pack then? Because wall pack's down to say 15, but on the plans, it says 20 feet. Same thing with, I guess, the lamppost in the lot. So I'm just trying to figure out.
I'll have to correct that. It is mounting height 20 feet.
Okay.
To be above the bottom story.
And same thing with the lamppost, I guess, the
Yeah.
light posts and then the lot, I
They
guess.
vary depending on.
Okay, 20 foot. Okay, that's,
Okay.
sorry, sir. That's it, Mr. Thompson.
Good catch, Carl. Good catch.
Oh, yeah, well, lights are kind of, people seem to be wanting the dark sky lighting, and I was trying to figure out if there was any other buildings in the area that had the lamp posts in the lots and stuff. I think there are a couple. I'm not sure. I just want
It
everything to
depends
be.
on the layout of the building,
Yeah.
quite frankly.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. And just, oh, sorry, one other question here. You have 2 loading zones in the lot back by the overhead doors. What would they be used for? Because they seem kind of small for tractor trailers or things, and one would block the other, so I'm kind of,
We're required to show 2
okay,
loading zones where trucks could park
okay,
there for a little bit of time.
okay.
Operation. It's just part of the code.
Oh, no, when I read loading zones before, I thought it'd back up to like one of the overhead doors, and I saw it to the side. I'm just
And
wondering.
typically, they're 12 by 45 is what the
Okay,
town code requires.
okay, so they're just drawn as to our code, in other words. Okay, cool. Thank you, sir.
Okay. John, I've got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
On police services, number 6, page 5. The staff report. Police services approaching inadequate. The Mount Airy Police Department has been contacted for APFO, and this department received a written certification. So did they get back to you with the certification?
I did, and it's approaching inadequate. So basically, at the time that APFO requirements were submitted, they were approaching inadequate. Now, again, approaching inadequate does not warrant the denial by the Planning Commission. But yes, we did receive documentation back from them stating that they were approaching inadequate.
What would constitute approaching inadequate in terms of police services?
Well, again, this isn't bringing any additional residents into the town, but, basically staffing. I know, and it's a delicate dance because, again, we have a certain population, and then we have the 1.1 to every 1,000 people. And we're budgeted for X amount of police. And that's where they come up with the adequate or inadequate.
I have a follow-up question. So when you say, it's just like basically the town itself is approaching inadequate, the police, not because of this particular,
That's correct.
okay. Just wanted to clarify.
Mr. Chair, oh, sorry.
Another comment? Go ahead.
Mike.
Please come to the mic.
Councilman Demoter, just a comment. Some of the earlier plans that you approved had the same scenario. So I just wanted to point that out. You've ticked those off for a couple of these, and I think it's a good question. What does approaching inadequacy mean? Is that, a wide gap, a small gap? What's the potential
In
impact?
terms of our population, we're on the threshold of not having enough police officers. Okay.
Mr. Chair, one more question for Mr. Thompson. It's more of a clarification. I asked him this earlier. I just want to verify that the town's aware that in the staff report, it mentioned a restaurant building, but Mr. Thompson indicated that it was incorrect. It was not an oversight. It was not taken off. Just want to make sure that there is no restaurant.
There's no restaurant being proposed.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, a quick question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, going back to the APFO on the water, and Barney, again, apologies to kind of put you on the spot. The staff report reads, proposed project is part of the pipeline development without additional water needed. The current quantity of water source and water treatment availability from the town of Mount Airy water system prior to adding the quantities of this project are considered inadequate. And then we have an APFO recommendation of adequate. So just kind of help me through those sentences.
Sure. For Twin Arch Business Park, we have set aside 3 commercial units. So it's 3 times 350 gallons a day, or 1,050 gallons per day for each lot. We have that as part of our log already, so that we don't have to pull from that. But what we do is we look at the allotment for Twin Arch Business Park as a whole and make sure they're not exceeding, that as a whole. And they're well within that, as they've been going through the lots. So they've been using on average less than 3 commercial units.
That's per lot, correct?
Per lot, correct.
1,050 gallons per day per lot.
Correct.
Gotcha. And this pulls from the industrial allocation or category, I should say?
No, so it's not one of the 13 categories because it's part of our pipeline development. So pipeline development, we have already set aside in it. And so that's water, we haven't used all of that pipeline development, but we have it set aside, reserved, so that we don't exceed the pipeline, what's in the pipeline. And then we have our net available, which you see in the report. Does that make sense?
I believe I follow you. Yeah.
Okay.
And so as we talked earlier, there will be a point, and I'm not, again, trying to put you on the spot, there will be a point where all of these categories and each category's allocation to include the pipeline will, I believe, be drafted and come before the council for approval to take us in to the next year or the next 6 months, I think. Is that accurate?
Yes, so every 2 years, we relook at the allocations, what we have available, and recategorize that allotment that's available.
Many thanks. And again, this wasn't specific to this project. It was just a broader sense of water, since
Right.
we all know that's a valued item in the APFO. Thank
Sure.
you.
Yep.
Yeah, this Twin Arch Business Park's somewhat unique because when originally, as Barney pointed out, there was a water allocation for it, but the actual uses out there are much less. So it gives the town some cushion.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
I have another one. Mr. Thompson, the plan that does the building include entrances at the sides of it? So like main entrances? So the side there and the side above? Is there going to be a main entrance into the building as well as retail access around the sides here?
There is a main entrance at the front of the building.
Okay.
Into there. And then ADA, fire code, we have side exits out
Okay. So
Court.
is there like so there'll be like a main hallway and suites outside, or like on the sides going down?
To
it,
be
or what is the
determined, they
inside?
could all be separate entrances
Okay,
there, most likely.
all right.
To allow them the flexibility of 20,000, 5,000 square foot.
And to
rental
that,
spaces.
Planning Commission doesn't look at the interior layout of the building. That's really up to the
Yeah,
applicant.
I was just curious.
But I understand what you're asking.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? Chair will entertain a recommendation. Anyone willing to propose approval of site plan?
Okay. All right, I recommend we approve based on.
Yeah, you're moving, you're moving. You're moving, not recommending. Sorry.
Oh,
Making a
sorry.
motion. You're making
Making
a motion.
motion to recommend we,
You're not recommending, you're making a motion.
yeah. Thank you for catching that. Make a motion to recommend that we, following condition approval of the concept site plan for Lot 14A. Should we say that it's going to become 14B now, or
Not at this point, because.
not at this point? Okay.
14B hasn't been recorded, so.
Okay. Of the Twin Arch Business Park Section 4, subject to the following conditions: that all town and county agency comments are being addressed, that the overall height of the building is reduced prior to resubmitting the final site plan for the review. The addition of a new fire hydrant will need to be located within 150 feet of a new sprinkler connection located on the building, and the recordation of extinguishment of the 100-year floodplain showing on AP 20-23-0009.
All right.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Has been made and seconded to recommend conditional approval
1
of
second, Bill.
site plan.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I may request that item, that number, the second bullet, be revised to say that the building height shall meet the code for industrial. Because if you put reduce and I come back saying I didn't reduce it, you're going to say what we told you to, and it meets it. And then the third
Height code, okay.
of the industrial. And if the third bullet could say that there shall be a hydrant within 150 feet. If there's an existing one there, then I don't need a new one.
Within 150 feet.
That's what Joe,
Well, that's a comment from the fire department, so I'm just repeating what.
I know, but
What they sent in with their APFO.
I didn't label one of the existing fire hydrants. So,
Okay. All right, good.
has
You
to be,
okay, Tom?
Not sure I followed the last part of that.
Yeah.
If right now there's a motion, the movement has to accept the amendment in order for it to proceed, and then it has to be seconded as amended, then discussed and voted on.
So you have to accept the
Martinez,
motions.
movement has to be the one to accept the amendment or not.
Well, I'm just wondering if there's any objection from anyone before I accept anything.
I would just add, since we're going to make adjustments, would there also be a respective of what Councilman Munder mentioned with regard to the photometric plan, would that be also added as an amendment to the current sheet 6?
it can be, or I just have to note and make the change for the final site plan, whatever the commission desires.
Yeah, just to be comprehensive and thorough.
I have no problem.
So I guess now I'm making an amendment to the amendment.
She's the mover.
We're still in amendment, I think.
All right, so hang on. What is it? Object. I'm so sorry.
Why don't you
I need
ask the attorney,
clarification.
ask for the attorney would be the person to talk to, Martina.
Okay, so we have the fire hydrant
Martina.
question. Huh.
Okay, so why don't we take these in two steps? There's a recommended amendment from Mr. Thompson. Is that an amendment that you accept as the movement?
All right, so we're going to accept, my goodness, we're going to accept the note about the second bullet about meeting the height code for the industrial requirement. Okay, and then we have the other note for the third bullet was about the fire hydrant. So it says the addition of a new fire hydrant will need to be within located within 150 feet. And your note, your amendment was,
That a fire hydrant shall be within 150 feet of the building.
okay, not of a new sprinkler connection.
Well, that's all part of building permit, but I think what's coming from the fire department is they want a hydrant within 150 feet of the building. That's what we have to show.
All right, so we'll cut out, so we'll have to say of the building and not of the new sprinkler connection to amend it to what you're saying.
And that's what the fire department's APFO, their review, this is the comment that they gave. So
Right.
I'm repeating exactly what the fire department asked.
Okay,
If
so
it's part
I
of the
just want to
site
make sure
plan.
the sentence is correct.
No, I think the third one should just stay. He'll still be able to deal with these issues. They all could stay, and he can deal with it when it comes to the final plan review, in my opinion.
Okay.
That's my opinion. That's why I put it the way I did.
All right. So we have
I don't think we should change it. I think we should do it the way it is, approve it, and these will have to be addressed before the final plan approval. It's
Okay,
not that
so
big a
then
deal.
we will keep the third note the same and move it along.
That's fine.
Okay. Now, is there a second? Or sorry, Mr. Chairman.
It's up to the chairman to request a second.
All right. Is there a second?
Can I get clarification? I'm sorry. So you amended it
For the second bullet,
which is the height to be consistent with.
Industrial.
Okay, with industrial code. And then
We're
we do
gonna-
not accept changing the fire hydrant.
right, the third note will stay the same.
I will second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? All right. Very good.
Ralph's amendment, if he wants to put it through. He wanted to add about the height of the mounted fixtures instead of being 15 and 20, but that can be a change also as part of the final site plan.
Well, but the motion's
Okay.
been
Yeah, we.
Okay,
we
okay.
moved on.
Okay, no worries. I'll just make sure that comment that, I'll make sure I get.
All right. So we took care of everything? Final site plan. All right.
Yeah, I think everybody was in favor, right? Steve, you voted yes?
Yes. All right. Thanks for sticking with us. Okay. Conditional final subdivision plan, P 220013, Dennis subdivision. Ron, this is your night to represent one after another.
You took away the May meeting, so we kind of had to press forward with a lot of these.
Mr. Chair, we should make it more difficult on Ron tonight? Or he's not used to these easy nights, I think.
There's plenty of meeting left.
Okay. All right. Bring us up to speed on this.
Yeah, 1 second, I'm just trying to bring up the layout real quick. That's not what I want. Sheets are not labeled, so is this all the same thing? No.
Oh, this is Dennis
go.
Kitchens and Baths, all right. 1010 South Main.
Okay, sorry about that. Again, this is the Dennis subdivision, P 22-0013. This is 1010 South Main, as Bill Butts just mentioned. This is a residential subdivision along South Main Street. This property came in through the Board of Appeals and received an approval to increase the density to allow for the 5 lots on the 2.2 acres. This is now considered a cluster subdivision. So cluster subdivision, the building restriction lines have been reduced per the code down to 25% of the minimum setback requirements for the BRL, and that's part of the code. Again, this is for the final approval. This has received all final approvals through Carroll County. If you skip to page 22, page 2, you'll see I do have some red noting in there as well. And this references back to 9823H1, which allows the reduction of the bulk requirements to 25% of the normal bulk requirements. As noted above, the proposed plan does not meet all the normal requirements. The proposed plan indicates front and rear setbacks at 20, side yard at 9, and lot widths also vary between 97 to 56 feet. Again, this is inside the 25% reduction of the bulk requirements. I also have submitted in your packet the APFO request, waiver request from Van Mar and Associates. And I'll let him explain that. There is also, by granting final approval, so when a subdivision comes in, are you looking for something, Ron?
I was just looking to see if any of the adjacent owners were here.
Okay. Again, so with a subdivision of this size along a main state highway, there'll be some road dedication that will occur to state highway, which will be down all along South Main Street. There are also, there's a distance requirement in our code that would be certain distances between the entrances to new subdivisions within the town, which will have to be approved as well as part of this plan. The distance between entrances are less than what's allowed because of the arterial road, and I'll let Ron speak to that as well. I've also in the packet have included his request for that as well. So I will release this to Ron for him to pitch his plan.
Thank you again, Ron Thompson, Van Mar Associates, here for the Amicas. They are out of town on projects. As you may or may not be aware, their business is the multi-digital signs, which takes them all throughout the East Coast. And right now, they're in North Carolina on an installation. As John mentioned, this is for a 5-lot subdivision. And I apologize, I was sorting around to see if any of the adjacent property owners, I spoke with Phyllis Reed twice last week. She couldn't be here tonight, but I confirmed and have worked with her on the design so that the fence and the landscaping along her property are retained and the drainage goes to the back end of her site, following the natural drainage swale. And same with Bill in terms of what we're proposing. The design itself, it is a redevelopment site, as I had mentioned before, because it is primarily impervious area. So when you remove the impervious area and are less than the existing, you then are exempt from stormwater management. I shouldn't say exempt. Your treatment for stormwater management is the reduction of impervious area. That gives you approval, and we have an approval letter from them from stormwater management. In addition, per the Carroll County Code for Forest, which Mount Airy has adopted, when you're greater than 70% of a redevelopment site and are redeveloping it, you then become exempt because they want you reusing sites as opposed to going into green fields and removing forest or trees. So that's why you don't see any specific stormwater management facilities on the plan, nor do you see any forest conservation replacement on the plan or off-site. Finally, well, not finally, Our proposed, when we initially proposed the design, we actually were going to take the utilities out through the adjacent property owners. We eliminated that, working with Carroll County and with the property owners, so that the drainage now from the street goes down and a much reduced drainage into the swale down here. And the sanitary sewer connects down through a drainage and utility easement to a manhole. That's at the end of Sunset, or whatever that street is there.
Okay.
Our open space, we meet the requirements. We're greater than 3 acres per 100 people on it. So the next steps in this would be that, hopefully approved tonight, preliminary subdivision. It would be the last of the subdivision that you would see. The next element that you would have come before the Planning Commission would be the final plat. And then the improvement plans are reviewed at staff level with town engineer, town planner, so forth.
Okay. So this is the subdivision phase.
This would complete the subdivision phase with the exception of the final plat.
Okay. And what would the timing do you project be for the next phase?
Before early fall. And the reason being, there's a lot more detail than what I normally would put in here for utilities. And because of the way that stormwater management is being treated with the reduction of the impervious area and forest conservation, those are not hurdles that I have to continue to climb over that I normally would in a lot of final site plans or subdivision plans.
Okay. So this is step one.
Yeah, step 2, basically, you did the concept, now the preliminary.
Yeah.
And then the other, we would proceed working with State Highway to get an access permit onto State Highway.
All right.
So, do you want me to talk about all of the letters that I had submitted here?
Sure.
Okay, as required by code, because we are meeting the on-site open space, but because the town in their accounting formula has not added to their open space, we're required to request a waiver from town-wide, town not being in compliance with their ordinance for open space. And we are able to request that since we're meeting it on site. The second waiver, as John mentioned, was the intersection spacing. If I can find all of mine here. And I did go through that modification request and justification for it, that really there is no, this is the only point of access from the site along Main Street. And it's only, well, there are 5 homes, so peak hour trip would be 5 or less there for it. So it's because of the code, we have to request that. The second.
And Ron, that standard of 750 feet from the next adjacent intersection, waiving that is in relationship to what adjacent intersection on South Main?
Actually, there are 3 of them.
Right. So the nearest one is?
The nearest one is Fairwood Lane at 216 feet. Flower Avenue is 295 feet. And we are 640 feet south from Warfield Drive. So there are a lot of streets. And they're kind of minor subdivision streets, quite frankly. There is no other place for this intersection. The other modification in the letter that I requested, modification number 1, was the cul-de-sac dimensions. The town code states that the cul-de-sac shall be a 60-foot right-of-way, 50 feet of pavement with an island in between, minimum of 14 feet travel lane. The town does not like to have islands in the middle of their cul-de-sacs because they are required to maintain them. So working with the town engineer, we initially were approved at 42 feet. We've increased it to 46 feet with no island. And I won't speak for Barney, but I believe that was acceptable to him.
Was it, Barney?
Yes.
Okay.
The other modification, along with the reduction of that, is the reduction of the sidewalk from 5 feet to 4 feet. Because of the small amount of additional lots, this was to help offset stormwater management, not to put them into a tailspin.
Town code lists sidewalks at 4 feet. I've always designed at 5 feet, basically because of code requirements, but this one, 4 feet will work.
Chairman, some questions?
Yes.
First off, on the radius of the cul-de-sac, since that's a fresh item you just illuminated, I'm guessing because we got an APFO adequate from the fire department and fire services, I'm guessing the reduction of that radius down still allows for fire equipment to traverse the cul-de-sac and exit?
It does, and when I put the fire turning radius on a 42-foot, it actually worked. Tight, but it would work.
Still works?
Yeah.
Okay. The second question I have is, and just from my perspective, and let me caveat with that as a bit of a preface, when we deed open space to the town now incurs the obligation of maintaining that open space, i.e. like mowing grass, et cetera, relative to now owning that property. I think that's a fair statement. And in this particular instance, I know that we have had a lot of effort, you working with adjacent neighbors to kind of mitigate the flooding and the water flow from the rear of the cul-de-sac down onto that property based upon the geography and the slope and et cetera. So I would just urge that prior to us accepting that deed, we would ensure that we inspect and ensure that all those mitigation efforts that you're proposing in your design are in place and are handling that potential flooding. What I'm trying to say is I would hate for the town to assume ownership and now be the person held liable for any continued water issues into those adjacent properties. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, basically, as I've explained it to particularly Phyllis, she's the one that gets most of the water, Phyllis Reed, is that there still will be some water coming off lawn area, but it's no longer sheet flow from pavement areas into her lawn there. And that we've positioned the storm drain to where she wants it, which is the line between her grass and the wooded area there. There's actually a natural swale. So the town, as part of the Public Works Agreement, would be bonding. We would be bonding, one of the elements would be the storm drain system, along with the pavement and other public improvements, so that their inspection of it.
Correct. And then my last point, the staff report makes a recommendation with regard to how the homes at the entrance will face. And there's a recommendation that we have the design to ensure those homes, and I'm going to call them the shoulders on the left and right of Chevrolet Drive, will those homes be turned and face South Main Street?
The front of those homes will face Main Street, and that's what's shown in here. Very similar to what is up at the one house at Pine Grove Manor.
Right. And just for thoroughness, this is consistent with what I believe was also asked of Green Tree in a development further up Main Street for that same kind of harmony with the neighborhood. So I think it's consistent with that. Thank you.
I have a question, Bill. The 0.51 acres of property, how did that come about that it's dedicated to the town? Is the town, that becomes public space so that other citizens, residents can use it? Or-
Town requested it.
Okay. And it's like a trade-off, so it's the town will own it, and then other people can come and use it if they want to, or what? Or do you know,
I
or-
guess it's open space in town. That's up to the town.
Okay, so the town requested it, but yet the owner will be bonding.
We bond the construction, the street,
Okay.
sanitary, sewer, water line, storm drain.
Okay.
Responsible for the installation of the streetlights, those items.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if there's no one other, no, go,
Sorry.
go, no, don't be sorry, Martina, no problem.
I didn't open my mouth fast enough. Given what was there before, you guys have gone through the soil and everything's been remediated if it needed to be. I mean, it's been through a couple of different sort of industrial, almost, businesses.
We had a site environmental assessment 1 done, and there are no hazardous materials. The reason for that being is it's all impervious. Doesn't have any way of getting into the soil.
Because it's all.
It's all on asphalt concrete.
Just out of curiosity, how thick is that concrete asphalt?
I'm guessing the asphalt's at least 3 inches thick. Concrete pad for a building is going to be at least maybe 4 plus footers and stuff.
And if I could just jump in and follow on to Martina's point, and that is when you get to the phase of demolition of the current plat, is it fair to say there's a substantial amount of demolition that has to occur to remove all that surface product? And so I guess a question for John is, when will we be able to review the demolition plan, the noise abatement? Because the shoulders of this are, of course, residents. And so my concern is, will we have some insight as to the measures you're taking with regard to the demolition?
The only measures that we can really take is dust control and the times of construction, which the town has an ordinance, noise ordinance for. So.
And so a work permit would then allow you to move forward with that? Is that after?
Yeah, the contractor, and it'll be monitored by the town in terms of, there's a pre-construction meeting with the town engineer. I think John usually attends those at times.
Yep.
And for those type of activities.
I just have one more question. I know you said you did you spoke with, is it Miss Phyllis, the neighbor? Yeah. Were there any other, I know you said that other people aren't here, but were there?
No,
other-
I did speak with Bill and his wife on the corner lot, and that's why we're retaining the fence. And you'll note that we're actually transferring a sliver of land to him, which then retains all of the landscaping that he has put in there, particularly for butterflies and other things going on there. And we're retaining the wood fence along that line.
Right, okay.
And I did speak with the owners on the other side and just explained what was going on. They didn't have any particular issues they needed addressed.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
And with that, you did say, because there was concerns about taking down fencing and trees. You're not taking down any existing trees or fencing on that side?
Correct.
Okay. The other thing is, how wide is this street?
Which street?
Chevrolet Court.
Chevrolet Court will be 34 feet, standard roadway width for subdivision roads in town of Mount Airy.
Okay. So parking on both sides or single side?
Could be.
Okay. And then the open space in the top left, is that just going to be open, somewhat flat grass? Is that what you guys are doing?
Grass and slopes less than 25% coming down the cul-de-sac. We've graded them specifically for that.
Let's try to see if I can find the grading plan real quick.
Thank you.
So there's some buildings back there, gravel, that all have to be removed.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
Mr. Thompson, I know it was a Chevrolet dealership at one time. Did they repair Chevrolets there? Was it a repair shop?
Well before my time.
Yeah.
I
I'm
Assume
asking,
they
I'm asking 'cause
probably did.
if, some of those old places, they had, in-ground hydraulic lifts, and I don't know how old that place is but if they're in-ground hydraulic lifts, they would probably.
This does not have any.
No lifts at all?
It's a flat concrete
Gotcha.
pad.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, some of my questions were asked by the commission members regarding the, your work with the neighbors, so I'm glad you did that with Miss Reed. That was going to be one of my questions, and also the two surrounding neighbors had concerns. You took care of that. But to follow up on something Martina said about environmental site remediation, I know it's paved now, but as Mr. Beta just said also, it's an older building. Some of the paving might not have been there. Will there be steps taken during the, I want to say, the demolition process if there's potential contamination, site contamination identified from past uses? Will that be remediated? Or are you taking steps to, once the pavement's removed, to, do another site remediation assessment?
The site assessment has indicated that no further actions are required, primarily because the building burned down and all of that had been removed. So that if there was anything of hazardous material, that's where it would have been in the roof, shingles, insulation.
I'm just concerned, like, as Mr. Beta said, older dealership, in-ground hydraulic lifts, or before there was pavement, or environmental regs, people would just change your oil, take it out back and dump it. So, and then it's been paved over, so I just want to make sure that,
Well, a lot of it
if there's a chance.
A lot of it in the back is actually gravel.
Okay.
So you can see from it
All right,
whether there's any problem.
making sure. Thank you.
Make it quick. Dave Pyatt. When I was on the council, the owner wanted to sell that land to the town as a park. And this has gone back probably 2010, something like that. There was a waiver on the sale of the property because of an environmental contamination issue. And I have to go back and remember, there's a phase 1, 2, 3 evaluation before the land could be sold. They had to put this waiver on the offer to sell the property. And there was some environmental contamination, which they didn't go in and do the actual remediation, but they did identify a number of contamination in the ground that was fairly stable, but there was some contamination. And at one time I had a copy of the report, but I don't think I have it anymore, but there is something in the history.
All right, any other comments?
So I would piggyback on both of that. I think the question is, we want a remediation, we want a testing when the soils are, when the concrete is all removed and the rubble's removed, we would like to have testing done prior to any installation of anything, I guess is probably what we're trying to get at.
Sure.
So I think that's would be part of the improvement plan that Barney and I would review for, and we would like to see that being done. Does that satisfy everybody? Because that's what it seems like we're looking for.
Yes.
So we could add it.
Yes, again, we'll have the final plat that'll come in, and then when the improvements plan comes in, ultimately, when Barney's going out and doing the inspections, once the site's been cleared, then we want to have some kind of testing done of the soils that are existing underneath of the slab. Because, yes, it might be concrete today, back in the 20s, it might have been a pit, and they covered it over with concrete. Did they do test bores through the concrete to go into the soil beneath the concrete? Was that the testing that was done, the stage 1 or level 1?
Phase 1 doesn't require, that's a phase 2.
So again, and you understand what everybody's asking. So I think that's minimum what we should be requiring. Again.
So,
Yes, ma'am, if you want to speak, please.
I'm Sheila Jones. Live on 102 Flower Avenue. And I'm downwind of this place. And how are they going to keep all that stuff coming in the air and coming all into Flower Avenue and the other homes? There's a lot of demolition that has to be done. A lot. I walk by there every day. So how do they keep that out of the air? Is there some way? Or is it just,
They end up having to spray water, certain type of, that keeps dust from blowing.
and that'll do it?
That typically is what it is. It depends on what they do and how that activity.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Ron?
I have a question for John. So the thing, what you called the improvement plan, if that's said as part of the condition, then that would incorporate what you're talking about, or do we need to specify?
I would put it in there as a condition of the approval, because again, that holds the feet to the fire.
Right. What I'm saying, my question is, does the improvement plan, is that a term of art in which you can decide what needs to happen? Or do we need to put in there that the testing needs to be done?
You know, and I apologize, but I'd have to ask Barney, because
Okay.
he's the one that would be doing those inspections and,
Okay.
If you make it a condition, then I have to add it in the sequence of construction.
right, so then, yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out what the condition is, whether the condition is an improvement plan or whether the condition is,
The condition is,
Test-
once all the foundation, any material is removed, that the soils underneath the slabs in multiple locations be tested for contaminants.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
at least where the concrete is existing, which is 2/3 of the site, or it's called a third of the site. The gravel, I don't think is an issue. It's more of where the actual foundation of the existing building was. Because again, you can easily pour concrete in whatever that hydraulic pit was, or the drainage pit where they used to just pour over with 1920s car and pull the plug, let it hit the floor, and put the plug back in and fill it up, and off you go.
Would that need to be added to this?
That's
recommendation?
exactly.
Yes, that's what we're
exactly. I
talking
think that's
about,
what
yes.
Leslie's talking
Yeah.
about.
But
So we're gonna-
thank you for the clarification.
Yeah,
But to be specific, once the site has been cleared, or should we say cleared of all material, existing cement, gravel?
I would defer to the town attorney for that to say. I think it's really gets back to the concrete material. You know, to what extent?
How specific, Tom?
I'm sorry, does this condition need to be? I
Right.
would say not very specific, but it ought to be subject to the approval of the town engineer and the town planner.
Right, we could just say that.
Say the testing protocol.
Right, and the level of testing.
That's correct, the depths.
Sorry, one other thing. I know that we've done a Phase 1 site assessment. I know some things are looked for, but there's always been questions. I've heard rumors that there's underground storage tanks have or were located there. I know, has there been ever been any proof of that, or currently, has there been any, I want to say, evidence to the contrary that there has not been, or are currently not any buried tanks still there?
I'm not aware of them. I'm not sure if town staff is aware of any buried tanks on there, and I'm not sure if that Chevrolet dealership was actually a refueling station as well at some point in time.
Yeah, and I'm
But
not
I would
sure.
have thought, if they removed the refueling station, typically, they would remove that tank at that point in time.
Yeah, I'm not sure if any tanks would have been buried related to the, I want to say, the soda pop manufacturing that was going on there too, and there. So I'm not sure if there's tanks there or not, so I just want to make sure that they could not, that if they are, we identify them and have them removed too.
Well-
I'm not sure.
One of the items, they're going to be selling 5 single-family lots. They're going to have to assure
Yeah,
the people buying the homes that it's a clean site.
yeah, I just,
So, I mean, that's all part of what the owner's going to have to end up doing.
yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. Sorry.
These lots will have basements potentially?
Pardon?
They'll have basements potentially, all of these homes? Yeah.
I would anticipate.
Okay.
Well, some of them will, some of them,
Maybe.
Pine Grove Manor did and didn't, so it all depends on the home. Yeah.
Area expert Barney Quinn.
And I was just going to say, the Phase 1, I mean, does reach out to different agencies to see if there's any history on that site as to underground tanks and things like that, so any hazards. So if you got ESA Phase 1 approval, environmental site assessment, then and it doesn't have any conditions to go to a Phase 2, then there's reason to believe that you're not going to encounter that. But your second thing is when they do excavate, they encounter a tank or something, we're going to be there to, we should be contacted to, to say that this is out there and we go take a look at it.
Do you think it's warranted to actually have, once all the concrete's removed, to actually have the Phase 1 testing done? And that's really the question we're having right now. I think it couldn't hurt to have that done. Do you feel?
It certainly doesn't hurt to have it done. I mean, we could certainly do a couple of composite samples underneath the concrete on each side so that we can, just kind of confirm that. But it's not an MDE requirement.
Can we include that in the staff recommendation, or should?
We could.
All right, that'd be the easiest way to do it. Okay?
On the town recommendation, John, just help me out. In the very first bullet, it talks about the planning commission allows for the modification of the town code and so on and so forth. Would it be more appropriate, instead of saying you're looking for us to modify town code, which I believe is within the purview of the council, would it be appropriate that we issue a waiver of that 9816? Do you understand the difference between the two? We're not modifying the code,
Right.
Yeah, you would be granting a subdivision regulation variation pursuant to section 98-49 for hardship.
what he said.
Maybe a little slower.
You
would be granting a subdivision regulation variation pursuant to section 98-49, which permits the Planning Commission to relieve a developer, in this case, from strict compliance with the subdivision regulations found in Chapter 98, and may vary the regulations so that substantial justice may be done and the public interest secured.
You'll email you that tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's on tape.
pursuant to what chapter?
Chapter 98, section 98-49.
98.
Can you say that one more time, but pull the mic just a tad closer, because Deborah needs to do the minutes and she can't hear it all the time.
So the proper terminology on that one is that a request has been made for the Planning Commission to grant a subdivision regulation variation pursuant to section 98-49, which states that where the Planning Commission finds that unusual hardships may result from strict compliance with these regulations, the regulations in Chapter 98, it may vary the regulations so that substantial justice may be done and the public interest secured, unquote.
Thank you.
And then to follow up on that, in the third bullet, the recommendation that the single-family houses must, and it says literally, match the existing neighborhood. My only thought with regard to that wording is it could be held literally, which would be, I think, a difficult expectation. And so I'm just throwing out to my fellow commissioners here, would it be something that's saying, in harmony with?
Would be better.
I'm just trying to be more reasonable as to the expectation here, because it'd be awfully hard to match, if you understand what I'm
I
saying.
think the single-family homes should need to harmonize.
Be in harmony with the existing neighborhood?
Yeah.
Yeah, because actually, these are smaller than the surrounding homes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, I'm admitting that that's a subjective thing. I mean, it is. And so, again, we'll rely on the wonderful town staff to kind of measure those elevations as to being, quote, in harmony, unquote. Is that fair?
Yeah, and to that point, when those building permits come in, I will probably recommend that I want to see elevations of all these 5 homes to make sure they're in compliance, so they don't look more commercial than residential.
Okay.
Just one other comment to follow through on Ralph's too. We still use the, let's see.
There's the design standards.
Yeah, I couldn't think, thank you, the design
Yep.
standards for new single families.
Yep. And I'm sure Ron has a copy of that.
Yeah. Thank you, John. I couldn't think of the correct terms on that.
No worries.
Can we move forward on this tonight, or do we need to reconstruct the staff recommendations and so forth and so on?
I think we can move forward with it. I don't see any problem with that. I think whoever was taking good notes and could repeat what Tom was saying.
Describing what you're doing. And legally, what you're doing is you're charged with enforcing Chapter 98, which is a series of regulations. You're also given, pursuant to the code, the right to vary those regulations, not strictly apply them in a given case, if that would create hardship. That's basically what you're doing.
So we're okay to move forward if somebody wants to make a motion.
All right,
So, Mr. Chair, I'll venture a motion.
all righty.
I make a motion that the Planning Commission grant a preliminary plan approval to allow this 5-lot subdivision with the following conditions. That the Planning Commission grant a subdivision regulation variation pursuant to Section 98-49 to relieve the developer due to unusual circumstances in meeting the minimum standards of 9816 L2 street design standards and 9816 L2 open space waiver for the deficiency in open space within the town of Mount Airy. Secondly, that all town, county, and state review comments must be addressed before any building permit is issued. Third, that the single-family houses must be in harmony with the existing neighborhood, and the 2 houses located along Main Street must face Main Street. And lastly, at the completion of demolition and at developer's expense, appropriate soil testing as determined by the town engineer occur and be reviewed by the town engineer prior to further construction.
Good. Good job.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All right. Are we ready for a vote? All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. With modifications.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is the reintroduction and discussion and recommendations to the town council on ordinance number 2023-08, creation of guidelines. And this is a red line. I gave you guys a revised one at your desk. It has the word standards was removed and guidelines were introduced. So So creating of guidelines for the planning commission to grant open space inadequacy waivers under section 25-5G2. Bow legs. Sorry.
Is it this little one? This little print one?
I'm sorry, so, yeah, it should say, it should have a red thing on the front. It was on your desk when you guys sat down. It was underneath your elevations and your revised agenda that had a red at the top. One. No?
Yeah, I don't think they got it.
It might, I don't have the red one, but it might say up in the right-hand corner,
I don't know
Planning
that it's
Commission
red, it's
Review
just-
424.
Okay, I thought
No, it's not red. But in the upper right-hand corner, it should say Planning Commission Review 424. The bottom, Tom said.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. You ready?
Well, we're ready.
All right, well, good evening, commission members, Vice Chair Butts. So I am Council Member Stephen Demoter, and I worked on this ordinance in partnership with the town attorney, Tom McCarron. And this ordinance, the purpose of it is to provide guidelines to aid the Planning Commission as you make determinations on whether or not to grant an open space inadequacy waiver under section 25-5G2. So this was introduced at the March 6th meeting, and I know that you started to deliberate on this at the March Planning Commission meeting, and I appreciate that. I did watch the videotape of your meeting, and I have also tried to address some of the initial concerns I heard from your last meeting, and I'll get to those in a minute. A little bit more about what this is doing. So we know the Parks Board has certified that the town's parks and open space facilities are inadequate, okay? We know that. And under the current APFO, if the town is inadequate in terms of parks and open space, a development may not receive approval unless granted a waiver. And that's for all proposed development, any kind of development, single-family, townhouses, MXD, any zone development. So under subsection G2, the Planning Commission can provide a waiver to a development that provides a certain amount of open space as part of that development. But that's to qualify for a waiver. That gets you in the door. That says you've met the minimum open space requirements. But that's all it does, okay? You as the Planning Commission have to deliberate and make a determination on if you're going to grant a waiver or not. And so currently, there aren't any guidelines to help you think through the process, to walk you through a thought process of whether or not you should indeed grant a waiver or not. So what we have done in this ordinance is provided what we call a set of guidelines. They are essentially elements that walk you through a thought process and help you formulate your decision on whether or not you think that development should be granted an open space waiver or not. And that's what this is doing. So I want to take you to page 4 of 8 under section 3, because this is where the actual guidelines occur in the ordinance. I'm also going to hand out to you a red line version that has some additional changes to it that I think will help to address some of the comments you raised at your March meeting. So what I'd like to do is hand those out to everyone. And then I would ask you to go to page 4 of 8, under item 3, where the series of guidelines are presented. And as I said, we made a couple little additions, I think, to address some of Commission Member Gint's comments at the March meeting and some others.
Sorry, Steve, can you repeat?
Is everybody there? So go to page 4 of 8 in the real red line version that you were just handed out. The bottom third of the page, parentheses 3. It starts off with indeterminate. Everybody with me?
Yep.
Okay, so this is where the guidelines start. And so what we're saying here, and I think there was a little bit, I got a little bit of a vibe that it looks like, you know, there are a lot of guidelines here. Well, the idea is there are a series of guidelines, but you may apply them as you see fit and in the context of the kind of property you're looking at. So that's why, if you look at the wording and the red line here, in determining whether to grant or deny a waiver, to the extent applicable to a particular development and commensurate with the characteristics of the development, the Planning Commission shall consider and weigh the following. Then it iterates through all of the guidelines. So again, just think about what you all just did. You considered the Dennis Kitchens and Bath site. Okay, that was a site with 5 homes on it. So you're going to go through these guidelines, and some of these may be, that doesn't really apply, don't need to think about that, don't need to think about that. Should think about this, think about Commission Member O'Malley, okay? You didn't just think about, you asked the question, what's the size of the open space being provided, the amount? You followed up with, is that a grassy area? Are there slopes? What's the open space going to be used for? Those are some of those additional kinds of questions you might want to ask to help you determine should you indeed grant an open space waiver or not. Okay? So here are the main components that these guidelines cover. First, it asks you to think about what's the current size of the open space deficit that the town is facing. Right now we have an 80-acre deficit. That's a big deficit. Okay? So if we had a 5-acre deficit, you might walk through this, and these may not be that impactful. You have an 80-acre deficit. So the next question is, okay, I have an 80-acre deficit. How much open space is being provided? What's the acreage? What's the percent? And then the bulk of these guidelines get to the following kinds of points. What's the amount? I just said that. Where's the location of the open space? Is it in large parcels of green space? Is it provided in 6 pocket parks that may or may not be that useful? So what's the type of open space? Is it active or passive open space? Is it a place where you go and hang out, listen to a concert, or can you play sports there or play hopscotch or do something? Okay, so that's amount, that's type. Then you get into elements of quality. Does the open space have park benches or other improvements, gazebos? What's the quality of that open space, not just to the immediate development, but to the surrounding community and more broadly to the town of Mount Airy? Okay. And then, as I said, the overall benefits, not just to that development, but more broadly to the surrounding communities and the town. So those are kind of the general areas that these guidelines embody. So the idea is you would step through these and you would apply them as appropriate. Some you may do a lot of thinking on, some you may just breeze through. And then the other main thing this ordinance is asking for, if you go to page 7 of 8, at the top of the page, look at 4 and 5. So 4 is saying the planning commission may reasonably impose conditions on the granting of any waiver under this section. So if you want to grant a waiver to open space, you can put some conditions on that, okay? And then finally, number 5, the planning commission shall memorialize its determination to grant the waiver or not, and document its supporting rationale for whether or not you granted the waiver and why. And then that formal memorandum has to be made available to the public. Okay, so part of this is we want to, as a town, and you as a planning commission, want to be able to make these decisions and show you had a rationale, you thought through it, and you can articulate why you made that decision. You don't want your decisions to be arbitrary and capricious. You don't want to just say, I'm not granting a waiver, and a developer says, well, that sounds pretty arbitrary and capricious. Why? What? I gave you the minimum open space amount. Why am I not getting a waiver? And by articulating why, that for the record explains that. And the same for the citizens of the town. They're going to want to know, if you granted a waiver, what was your basis? Okay? So again, this gets into the situation we're in right now, which is, yes, the town can grant a waiver for open space. And yes, a developer can meet minimum amounts of open space provided, but that just gets you in the door. That's a minimum requirement to get you in the door for consideration. It's up to you to make that decision. What this ordinance is doing is giving you a thought process.
Thorough approach.
Yes, it's a thorough approach. So, and just like we said, dentist kitchens and bath, that's 5 homes, okay? I don't want to single out the Beck property, but, okay, we have a large 90-acre MXD development being proposed for this town. They are proposing a certain amount of open space. Is that enough open space? What's the quality of that open space? With an 80-acre deficit this town has, are they providing enough quality and amount of open space, not just for that development, but for the surrounding communities? And what is it bringing to the town, given the fact that we have such a large deficit? So for example, and this is one of the guidelines. Let's see if I can find it.
Councilman, may I ask a question?
Yes.
While you're pondering here?
Yes.
So if we're kind of tiptoeing around the Beck property conversation here, what is the Beck property's open space being used for now?
Well, that's a good question. And so through this process, they are providing a pre-concept sketch plan. On that sketch plan, they will show the locations of open space. You'll see the amount, you'll see the type. For example, on Beck West, they propose some pocket parks. Perhaps on the east, they're proposing pocket parks. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's appropriate for certain sections. You might look at that and say, you know, I mean, I'm exaggerating, but if all the open space is in 15 pocket parks, is that really an optimum amount and use of open space for this development and for the town? I can't find it, but I pretty much remember it. One of the guidelines was, is the development providing open space that meets a critical town deficit? And then I said, for example, active recreation. So my point is this, let me interpret that. We have citizens saying we have a scarcity of ball fields. That's active open space. If the developer provides more ball fields, that is addressing an active recreational need for the town. So you might look at that and say, you know, we got an 80-acre deficit, but they're providing some quality open space. It's usable. It's what the town needs. It's going to be good for that development and more broadly the town. So that in a nutshell is what this does. But I did want to try and address
I think some of the concerns, wow, that looks like a lot of things to think about. Well, yes, you should step through these.
Can I ask you a couple questions before you go on?
Yes.
Go ahead. Regarding the open space being for the entire town, or however you put it, it's my understanding that when you have these private developments, it's private, if it's going to be an HOA or a condo association, that's their space. That's not public space.
Well, actually, no, because this is about public open space. The town has a deficit of 80 acres of public open space. So what the pre-concept plan is showing is what public open space is the developer proposing to provide.
I mean, I'd like to agree with you, but I'd like to know if that's actually the case.
Okay, two things. First of all, there is a provision, I don't have the section off the top of my head, that I believe says that, at least in certain respects, even private HOA-owned and maintained open space must be opened up to use publicly. Residents outside that subdivision or whatever, number one. What was your second question? Sorry, I got lost.
That was my main.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
So then, I don't want to be making like the argument that I don't.
I think I remember at
Go
least
ahead.
what I was thinking you were asking, and that is, as the current open space waiver is written, it doesn't say, it says that, look, if you provide enough, and enough is defined in different ways depending on the type of development, enough open space within your development,
Okay.
in theory, you are mitigating the adverse effects of further burdening your public open
Right,
space.
because you're providing enough for the people that you're
In
bringing in.
theory, that's
Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
So, whether it's HOA space provided inside the development or it's going to be publicly dedicated space, you can qualify for the waiver if you provide enough open space, one way or the other.
Right, right. And I think we probably need to clarify that because the reason that's interesting to me is that the developer's argument is usually, oh, we're not really in an 80-acre deficit because of all this private HOA open space that we have that we don't count. So I'm not sure, like, how can it go both ways? I mean, something Carl said, of course, made an impression on me with the Green Tree property when we were talking about open space, and you were very clear about, well, you can't. Anyway, I won't repeat it. But I would like to know that. I think that that's very important then.
Square that because this
Yeah.
is an adequate public facilities.
APSO.
Right, right.
To your point, Commission member, if you look at page 6 of 8, look at page 6, letter I at the bottom of the page. Okay, and I'll read it out. And it says, while not creditable as public open space, the qualities of any shared on-site open space, such as shared open space associated with apartments, townhomes, and private open space that would contribute to the overall feel of open space within a community or development can be considered. So there's a little bit of that in there for that consideration. And the point being, if you have a lot of single-family homes, and they're on fairly good-sized lots, that's going to give you a feel of a lot of open space, in addition to townhouse developments that have their own private open space. But again, the requirement to the town is adequate public facilities, public open space, and that is for which we have the deficit.
Right, I understand that. I was just, these are likely going to be private. That was my question. So my other question, and this is what I had a question about last month, but you weren't here, is it seems like more directed at mixed use, so, and maybe even undoing that ordinance that was passed, 2021, 16 or 17, I think it was 16. So I'm just wondering whether there's some way to do this that's a little bit more narrowly tailored to what
Yeah.
concern really is.
Well, I see your point, but I don't necessarily see it that way. It truly is applicable to any kind of development, because we are at an 80-acre deficit, and the current ordinance says any development has to apply for a waiver. So some of these may look like they're more directed at MXD.
Well, you just said so
But-
yourself,
But,
actually.
no, I didn't say they're.
You implied.
No.
You implied.
I'm
yes.
saying you're going to go through all of these, and depending on, I guess the better way to say it is, the size and complexity of the development, that's going to lead you to really think through more of these than if you had a simpler, less complex development of 5 homes that we just saw.
Well, I'll just make one more comment, which is that the overall sentiment is probably fine. I would dramatically reduce this, because if you've ever, over the years, watched any of our meetings, you would know that we actually do deliberate and we kind of know how to do this. So, but I can understand generally, like maybe conceptually for areas or something, but I think that you're asking a lot of volunteers who already spend a tremendous amount of time on this work to kind of do something that you're not even, perhaps don't even know whether we already do it. I mean, like the property, the Chevrolet, 1010 South Main, it's like, yes, they're not going to provide 80 acres. No individual property owner or even small development. So the whole point, and it's confusing, maybe we should change that ordinance, but they're providing the amount that is to compensate for the number of people. So it's, and we of course care what types of open space. I mean, that was the whole discussion about Green Tree. It's like, no, you can't count unusable, wetlands as your open space. Like, we already know that. So I guess.
Been down that road.
Yeah, so I guess I would just recommend that, if you feel so strongly that something like this needs to exist, that you just, just reduce what it is that you think we should be doing, that we're not already doing.
Okay, so.
And because this is,
Well, thank you for the
so
comment.
that would be, I guess, my final.
Let me
comment.
give you a response, and that would be, if you're already doing it, then certainly looking through these questions, these guidelines, you should be able to just tick your way right through this. Secondly, if you look at page 4 of 8, item number 3, which is where we started. Okay, this is the language that we added to try and get at that concern. And this is basically saying, again, in determining whether or not to grant or deny a waiver to the extent applicable to a particular development and commensurate with the characteristics of that development. So again, how big is it? How complex? What's the type of development? The Planning Commission shall consider and weigh the following. So that gives you the caveat of apply these in however way you wish, in however thorough of a manner you wish. But this helps you walk through the process, so at the end of the process, hopefully you can sit there and say, in terms of the amount of open space, the quality, what it's providing to that development and to the town, even in consideration of the size of a deficit we have, that's quality open space that we should approve. And then you can articulate that in your memo, which gives you the rationale to the citizens and the developer and the courts, if it gets taken to the court, so your rationale is documented. That's the whole package here.
I had something. I understand what you're saying completely, but I really do think everything you want to say here can be done in 2 paragraphs. It really can. It's overkill. We already consider this. It's the same thing where the last subdivision we just did, they only got a half acre to work with. It's 5 houses. We already apply that standard when we look at, when you have something like the back property or Green Tree. It's a huge Obviously, you could think bigger. It's bigger. We already apply that stuff. So really, I think 2 paragraphs could sum up really what you want. And the whole memorandum thing, I had a question. Is the town council going to also create memorandums for their decisions?
Well, I think those decisions are documented either in an ordinance or in a vote or in a,
And you'll be creating a memorandum explaining your every vote?
I think if you look at the town council, when budget things come to us or requests for funding a particular item, those are all done through memos that get approved.
I think that line needs to be
Mr.
stricken.
McCarron?
Tom has a comment here.
The only thing I would say about that is anytime you are doing something, making a decision that could be appealed to the circuit court, the courts require what's called a findings and decision, written determinations as to what you did, why you did it, and its rationale. So by way of example, the Board of Appeals, when they decide a special exception or variance, must do a written findings and decision. Town Council, May 8, will be sitting actually not as a legislative body, but as a quasi-judicial body, undertaking a review of an application for rezoning. After that's over, one of the things that has to happen is that the Town Council must adopt a set of written findings and decision. Why? Because it could, in theory, be appealed by somebody, whichever way that goes, and the courts will demand that. In fact, before I came on, there was, I think, a panhandle lot that got denied. No written findings and decision accompanied it. It was appealed by the developer to the circuit court. Circuit court shot it back and said there's no written findings or decision. I can't make a decision judicially or review your decision because you don't have something in writing. That's the only thing I would.
That's for denials, though.
Yeah. Well,
No
no,
applicable.
it could be if you granted it, an aggrieved party who lives so close as to be uniquely aggrieved, have standing as well, to appeal to the court, in theory. So,
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Mr. McCarron? So we're looking at section 3 of this, or number 3 on page 4, and B states, the amount of open space proposed for the development and its percentage in relation to the net developable acreage, or in the case of MXD developments, gross acreage of the entire development. I recall that there was some added language about that that differs from the actual ordinance that was passed in 2020?
Actually, I think I could answer, or do you want to answer that, Tom, or? I think what you're thinking of is there was an ordinance that Councilmember Munder introduced.
Yes.
And it did not
That's what I-
pass, but he was proposing changes to the MXD ordinance.
Right.
Where it would be based on net developable.
Yes.
For MXD.
Yeah.
Now, the reason why the wording is the way it is here, because this applies to any kind of development, okay? The other development types, the
Well, this
open
just
spaces-
says,
the open
or in the
space-
case of MXD.
Well, this
development.
says-
So that specifically targets MXD.
It says two things. It says the amount of open space proposed for the development and its percentage in relation to the net developable acreage. That's, what we mean there is any development, except in the case of MXD, which is to be done by gross acreage, because that's what's in the MXD ordinance. That's why that's called out, because it has to be, because it's different.
Right.
According to the ordinance.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. So with MXD, be considering MXD as net development because the topography of most of Mount Airy, we have a lot of slopes and all that other stuff. It should be net versus gross developable because of the topography of some of the land.
And again,
correct?
if the MXD ordinance were to get changed to that effect, then that will be carried forward into this ordinance. But because this ordinance is just about APFO, it has to reference what's on the books in the other ordinances. There's another addition here. and I wanted to save this to last, and if you go to page 2 of 8, what I am proposing, when this goes to the town council, you're going to make a recommendation and a vote on this, and you may vote favorably or unfavorably, but it still goes to the town council. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, ask that one again? Yeah.
Okay. So look at
With
the,
recommendations or not?
Yes,
So they
with-
can
with
make
the-
it with
exactly.
all the recommendations or with
Yeah.
some of it, they can
okay,
sort
so
of
if you look at the top of page 2, look at the second whereas paragraph that's in red. Okay? This is important. The town seeks to move the timing of a request for an action upon a parks and open space inadequacy waiver to before the town council's vote on the pre-concept sketch layout plan for MXD and mixed-use CCC developments, because it is the pre-concept sketch layout plan that lays out site components such as proposed recreational areas to serve the intended residential population pursuant to Section 98. The point here is, all other development types go to the concept plan. The MXD has this thing called a pre-concept plan. And that pre-concept plan is doing all the same things that a concept plan does. It's giving you the layout of the buildings and where the open space is and the whole ball of wax. So given that this is a waiver determination, not just an APFO review, but we have a deficit of open space and we have to make a waiver determination, I'm proposing that that waiver determination has to be made before it comes to the pre-concept plan comes to the town council. And that, in many ways, helps you and it helps the citizens. And the citizens have been asking for this. You know, in the town survey and all of the comments, they've been saying how much they value open space and recreational space. And so as the developer presents the pre-concept plan sketch, and we have charrettes, and we do all these things, everyone's going to see where that open space is, and you'll be able to start to make judgments about the quality of that open space. Having this ordinance will aid the citizens in asking questions and saying, you know, I'm not sure that, you know, does that open space, is that of high quality? What's that giving me? Is it doing this? Is it doing this? So you may help to drive a process that gets you open space that's more accommodating to everyone, and you may actually increase the chances of that development, you know, meeting all the requirements and meeting the citizens' desires. And there will be a workshop of the Planning Commission and the Town Council farther down in this process, and we'll all be sitting there and we can ask these questions. That's my story. I did a lot of research into land use planning. I did a lot of research into federal agencies, the US EPA. All of these guidelines are drawn from very good sources. Yes, they're thorough, but you can walk through them however, with whatever rigor or not you choose to. It's there as a resource, as an aid to you.
Mr. Chairman?
Appreciate it. Yes.
To begin with, I think we have a 90-day period to deliberate on this proposal, correct?
Correct. 90 days starts with the March meeting, your March meeting.
With the March meeting,
March
gotcha.
6th.
So
27.
So we're in that deliberation period as my first point. My second point, and the most recent topic of the whereas, I'm just curious, maybe a question, Tom, also, that if we change the timing of the open space portion and the waiver deliberation at the pre-concept plan stage for MXD, did I capture all that right?
Yes.
I think we may have to ripple that into other sections of the code to say, at the pre-concept sketch stage for MXD, this is going to occur. This is a whereas statement here, but it does speak to what actions are required of the commission at the pre-concept sketch phase. Is that fair?
Yeah, so the whereas clause is actually seen on this red line, page 3 of 8, subsection 2 gets at that.
Yes, sorry.
So that changed the code provision. Now, that this as written, and, you know, it's up to legislators to.
Right.
Right. So as written, this narrowly applies to the open space waiver and the open space waiver alone. The rationale being that if you look at the things that must be laid out on a sketch, the sketch plan that the town council approves, among them are the recreational areas proposed for the development. That is to say, the open space. So,
Yeah, and I walked through that scenario with Tom, and it didn't seem like, again, this to me, the nice thing about this is, and I've been consistent on this at council meetings. We're not changing the MXD ordinance. We're not changing the requirement that you need to have an open space waiver. We're not really changing any requirements. We're providing guidelines as an aid in your decision-making. And yes, we're asking for you to document that in a memo, which should be a benefit to everyone. And yes, we're moving this. It still was required to be done. We're saying this should be done at the pre-concept plan phase, because everything that you see in a pre-concept plan phase, you have everything you need to make this determination. You're not going to see anything else in the concept plan phase. And I can even quote you something out of the code that kind of gets at that. But I think I made my point.
And so I think the answer is, as narrowly as this is proposed, we wouldn't have to also make edits in other sections of the code.
other than subsection 2 on page.
Right, right.
Yes.
Of
So this is
25-5.
It's fairly, it's contained.
Okay. My second question is, would among the considerations or guidelines, would it be prudent that we solicit the review and recommendation or opinion from the Parks and Recreation Commission, our fellow volunteers in reviewing a pre-concept sketch or any site plan that has offered up open space? I just don't see us collaborating with those who have a keen interest on parks and recreation. So I would offer that could very well be something if we do adopt any guidelines. Comment on that?
Let me think out loud, and maybe, Tom, you can, maybe what I'm thinking out loud isn't accurate, but I would think it's your determination, it's your process to arrive at the determination. If you, because there are some guidelines in here about passive open space, does it provide, places for people to gather, the arts? There's nothing that prevents you from reaching out to the appropriate commission and saying, what's your view on the passive open space in this development plan? Do you think that's quality? Is that going to give us, and then that's input to you to help you make your determination.
And again, my comment or my suggestion to include those fellow volunteers is consistent with, in 25-4, this is admittedly under the APFO concept plan stage review, is that we're to seek all applicable review agencies concerning the adequacy of facilities. So, yes, so we would normally go out to all applicable agencies, I would think.
If that helps you make a determination about an open space adequacy waiver, then I would think that would be appropriate.
Gotcha. And then another quick comment is, we talk about, and in your submitted proposed writing, we talk about open space, the physical land by which we categorize as open space. And then we also rift into amenities associated with that open space. And I reference words such as gazebos, playgrounds, et cetera. Those things which could lend itself to making the nature of the open space perhaps active, right? A playground.
Yes,
or-
exactly.
And I get that, and I understand that. I'm not sure as to what our authority is as a planning commission to dictate to a developer, and so I'm posing a question here as to our requirements that they not only submitted open space to satisfy the code, but included in it, the developer is also offering amenities. So my point is this, is it under our purview to broaden open space deliberation offered by a developer as to its nature with gazebos also thrown in, playgrounds also thrown in? Am I making myself clear?
Yeah.
In other words, it's not good enough for us, you need to add a playground there, Mr. Developer, or 3 gazebos on that acre.
I understand what you're saying, and again, I would just recast what you're really doing. What you're really doing is assessing whether you're going to grant them a waiver. They can say no. You're not dictating to them what their open space, but what you are saying is that, look, in order to achieve the waiver, even though you meet the bare minimums, you're in the door because you've got a you meet the threshold, you've got to provide open space that is qualitatively better than you're proposing. Now, if you don't want to do it, that's fine, but you might not get a waiver. So.
Yeah.
And that's fair. So we have that quality aspect that we can determine whether it includes amenities or not, I think is what you're saying.
Right.
Depending upon the specific project at hand, we can say, hey, it's great open space, but it lacks a gazebo or a playground.
Or active, or maybe more broadly, any active open.
I got you.
Any active recreational open space.
Right. And then in my last, I know I'm going a bit long here, but I want to put a wire brush to this really, really well. And that is under 25-8, we have a paragraph in our code that talks about mitigation. And I'll just paraphrase here. In 25-8, that's in the APFO review and certification that we're responsible for doing.
Correct.
It talks about mitigation, and it talks about if a developer fails to provide adequate fill-in-the-blank public facility among the 7 that we examined, that if that is going to be denied or delayed under Article 25, then the developer shall have the opportunity to provide infrastructure funds, improve facilities directly with town approval, or donate necessary facilities in order to mitigate the existing inadequacy of any of those 7 areas, right? And so I'm saying that only in the sense of when you offered wording that we could condition base the waiver, would that mitigation be something that we would say, we'll give you a waiver? I almost feel like I want to say it's a let's make a deal kind of thing, if you know what I'm saying. We'll give you the waiver if you go over to chapter 25-8 and do the following things for the town.
Here's, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
It's a question.
That's a good point, and that I had that thought process, and I talked through that with Tom. And if you look at page 1, there's a whereas, and this is why I think making a determination, giving a waiver on open space, I think is a very important decision. If you look at the second whereas statement on the first page, it says, the current APFO does not allow for mitigation or payment of a fee in lieu to allow the development process to proceed during periods of inadequacy with respect to parks and open space. So that to me tells me if we're deficient in open space and you determine that they're not worthy of getting granted a waiver, then I'll say this, and you tell me if this is correct, then the development cannot proceed until the town becomes adequate in open space. And that means the town has to go out and look for ways to become adequate, maybe through annexing property or whatever. There's nothing the developer can really do. Is that correct, Tom?
That's correct.
So you're saying if this passes, not in the current?
No, that statement is already in the current ordinance.
Okay, so where
It's not red line. If you look at the second whereas.
Where is it in the ordinance, in the APFO? Where is this statement, this whereas in the current code?
Section B 25-8, after public facilities test shall apply, even if.
Okay, I see it. Okay.
So that's the interesting part of this, is it's not like, we're inadequate in roads and the developer's going to pay to have some traffic signals put up, or we're inadequate in whatever. Water, okay, they can provide water. But open space, they can't mitigate. It's either there or it's not.
This is a critical concern for
Well,
Mount Airy going forward, given, where we currently are.
And Vice Chairperson, that's why I'm passionate about this ordinance, because I believe it's very important that the town really think through and be able to articulate why you are or are not granting a waiver
Is this,
for open space.
so you're talking about if the Parks Board is certified, the town, blah, blah, blah. This wouldn't open us up to the park saying you must make that a ball field or you must make that a gazebo or anything like that. They can just say you're deficient in open space. They're not telling us what to do with the open space.
The Parks Board is not empowered to do that, number one. Number two, all the Parks Board has done or would do is simply certify, catalog, if you will, how much open space you're supposed to have, which is 3 acres per 100 people within the town, and certify, are we currently adequate or are we not? And if not, by how much are we inadequate? Which the Parks Board did do 4 years ago, and certified that we were about 83 acres short, I think.
This is just for, I'm just wondering, in any way, would this interfere with what town staff has to do? It's not going to make any kind of burden on their job whatsoever, because we're, like, I mean.
Of course it is.
Well, I don't know.
No.
Like, poor John. He's shaking his head.
My only question is timing. So if this were to pass, it's prior to town council making a vote on the actual pre-concept sketch plan. So there's still pre-concept sketch plans, there's still joint workshops where they'll be involved as well. So it's not on all your shoulders.
Correct.
But it is a collaborative effort with town council and yourselves during these workshops, prior to us making the final approval of the pre-concept sketch before giving it to town council for their final review. So it doesn't happen right at the beginning, but it's, third in position or fourth in position. So just for clarity, so you understand.
There's teamwork.
So for example, for myself as a council member, when any development gets to me, in this case for MXD, because that's what would come to me, I'm going to use these guidelines as my playbook, and I'm going to read through them, and I'm going to look at the pre-concept sketch plan, and that's going to help me formulate my questions to the developer to say, well, what's the open space over here, and why is that an isolated spot there? Are there any trails connecting it? I understand the sentiment about we could do this in paragraphs, 2 paragraphs. I'm asking you to take some time and read through these. I think you will find them, many of them may be enlightening. For example, some of the guidelines say, is the open space connected by trails that help to interconnect the development and to help connect it to the surrounding developments? Because this is public open space. So people are going to come and use open space wherever it is. So all I ask from you is to give this some thought, read through all the guidelines, and maybe you'll look at it as I do and say, okay, yeah, there's a lot here, but there's a lot of good stuff here, and if it doesn't apply, it doesn't apply. I just check through until I get to the ones that are most meaningful to me for this particular development and the complexity of it and the size. And we have that wording in here as well.
Okay.
I want to make sure you understand that, yes, you have 90 days from the March meeting, but you can also request an additional 90 days, if I'm not mistaken, for continued review and comprehending of this ordinance. So you aren't pressured to make a decision within this 90 days from March. You can request an extension through the town council.
And just one final point of clarity, among the 7 areas of the APFO certification, water, sewer, schools, roads and traffic control, fire and rescue services, police services, and lastly, parks and open spaces. Among those 7, only that last one is one where a waiver can be considered and issued. That all the others are judged by adequacy, whether they will or will not. In other words, we can't waive meeting police services. We can't waive the water.
Correct. The G3 waiver applies only to open space and parks and recreation.
Understood. Thank you.
And I did have some language here out of the town code about what a concept plan review and approval entails and what's in a concept plan. And it basically, the point is, when you look at what's supposed to be in a concept plan, it even says the concept plan does not even require fully detailed information, but should include some basic information regarding environmental features, street layout, specific enough to allow for a public facilities review, da-da-da-da-da. The point is, the pre-concept plans we're seeing for MXD developments has everything you need to make a waiver determination, in my view. And it seems to me it's better to make that determination as soon as possible in the process, as long as you have all the information you need about that sketch.
Would there be I apologize, but staying with that thought, is there the potential, is it feasible that as we go through the pre-concept review, for example, we're about to go through the second charrette, step 2 in a current developments review, and as the developer and the property owner make adjustments to that pre-concept sketch, I can foresee that we're doing this suggested guideline review and documentation for every resubmission. And so, because every submission may adjust depending upon the feedback they receive through the public engagement, the council and commission workshops, et cetera.
Well, I think the point is, as that pre-concept sketch plan moves through the process and different iterations, I would think you'll be looking at that process and what's there in terms of the building layouts and the streets and the open space. It's not until the pre-concept plan, everybody says, okay, and the developer says, I'm done, this is my pre-concept plan. That's the point, that's the plan that you would look at and say, okay, should we grant a waiver for open space based on their final plan that will go to the town council?
So we have one in hand right now that's going toward its next step.
Right.
You would say under this guideline, your suggestion is we would not apply that energy yet per your guidelines on what we have in hand.
I think as a natural part of the process, you'd be participating in watching the charrette when you participate in the joint workshop with the council, again, on a draft pre-concept plan. It's still draft. It may be the third iteration, but it's still draft. You look at that and thinking about questions you want to ask about anything pertaining to the sketch plan, but in particular, you're probably thinking about the open space because you know you're going to have to make a judgment on it. But you don't make your final judgment until they hand us all the final plan.
Yeah, again, and I'm just being respectful of other commissioners' comments with regard to the time we have. If we're going to go through 3 versions of a pre-concept plan, and if you're expecting 3 deliberations
No.
and certification and documentation.
No.
Okay.
It's
Thank you.
just on the final.
I have one more question. Have you thought about maybe a definition for open space? Because there's not one as far as I can tell, not in the APFO. Is there a definition?
Yeah, so
Where is it?
it's not as clean. You're pointing out a good thing, with which I don't necessarily disagree. But if you go to 98-23, there are some definitions that get at it, though there are no definitions. Although I think we all understand what it means,
Right.
the active versus passive.
And right, and as I recall, because I guess I knew there was one, because I do recall that it doesn't have to be like green space, it can be, so that's another consideration, is that we might want to look at the open space definition, especially in terms of all the things that you're talking about, and maybe that would, anyway, so.
Because we have heard from some citizens, somebody suggested a butterfly garden or something like that. If we don't have certain things defined, I'm worried that someone could come up with a really great idea like that, and it's open space, but it's not in what like we could say, I just, there's various kinds of open space. I don't want to
Just
limit us.
A word of caution, as I've been told by multiple people, sometimes you want vagueness in ordinances, particularly to definitions, because if you get too specific, you limit yourself, because you said a
That would-
butterfly
yeah.
garden, well, if it doesn't make the definition of open space,
I'm
then you
wondering.
don't get it. So sometimes
That's true,
vagueness
too.
is good.
That's true, too.
That's what I was saying. People make these suggestions, and we can't really.
Right.
So please give this
No
your
problem.
sincere
Guidelines.
consideration. Read through all the guidelines. You may
Okay.
find them
Doesn't
illuminating or have questions, but I would appreciate your support of this.
All right.
The Shrek coming up, we may need more time after all of that.
Yeah,
So
probably will.
yeah,
Because we won't meet again until June.
right. So that might run up against the 90
Right.
days.
All right.
Okay, moving on.
Thank you, sir. Moving on. Let's see if we can get through it.
So, under reports, other business and future items, again, the public charrette for the Beck property, American Legion, 801 Prospect Road, Mount Airy, Maryland, 21771, May 20th, 2023, 1 PM to 5 PM. May 22nd, 2023, 6 PM to 10 PM. And May the 23rd, 2023, 2 to 6 and 7 to 9. The 23rd should be televised by CMC. They'll be present for that, for both sessions on 2023, at least the last time I spoke with them. That was my understanding. And then we'll go into the council liaison report.
All right.
All right, thank you. I'll try and make it quick. The council meeting was held on April 3rd here at Town Hall. We had a public hearing at 7 o'clock regarding to ordinance 2023-1, the MXD ordinance. I will just reiterate what was pertinent to Planning Commission-related items. On ordinance 2023-1, which was the MXD ordinance, which would have corrected some of the inadequacies in the MXD, plus add, I want to say, restrictions for use of vape and tobacco shops and potentially recreational cannabis shops in the MXD zone was voted down by the council. Another ordinance that was heard was ordinance 2023-9, which related to wellhead protection. I asked for a delay on that one because I'm trying to work out some concerns with the developer related to the Beck property regarding some restrictions that could hinder use of a couple wells on there. So I'm working on that. So hopefully, if we can get worked out the differences, it will be brought back before the council at the May meeting. As was mentioned earlier by the town attorney, there was an application for rezoning of 806 Park Avenue that was scheduled for May 8th at, do you remember the time, John? I wasn't able to drive by this
I
morning.
think it's 5 o'clock or 5:30.
5:30 here, May 8th at Town Hall. For that will be a quasi judicial hearing. So that concludes my report. The next meeting will be May 1st, correct? Yeah, sorry, I'm getting the, there's too many things happening at the first
I have a
part of May
question.
here for me. May 1st should be at 7:30 PM here at Town Hall. Thank you. Yes.
Question about the quasi-judicial hearing.
Yes.
So I was trying to remember what happened when we had that for the Voslo property. So it's just the council, are we involved? I felt like we were involved.
No, I believe it's just
Okay,
the
so-
council. They come and make the
Right.
case before the
Right, right,
council.
right.
It's almost
Okay.
like
I
a,
must have just been in the audience. Sometimes
like
I
a hearing.
get
Made a
confused.
recommendation one way or the other.
Well, yeah, we recommended against, but then I couldn't remember the next step. Yeah, okay.
No.
And that'll be all part of my staff report that gets compiled before town council.
Yeah, so that's on May 8th.
8th at 5:30 here at Town Hall.
Okay.
And I think we've got about 3 hours scheduled for that, so somewhere around there.
Should be completed by 8:30, hopefully.
Yeah. Is that it, Leslie? Was that the only question?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Just checking, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And again, you do have the zoning administrator report in there as well.
Yeah.
And now on to the next item, the next planning commission date, June ? So initially, I brought it to you, the 26th again was MML. I'll be attending that currently. I was hoping to change the date to June 19th, realizing as I was doing the agenda, that's now a national holiday.
That's right, Juneteenth.
So I'm recommending that we possibly move it to June the 12th. Again, because May, we will not have a planning commission in May because of the charrette. So I feel
Oh,
like
right.
that's a good balance between everything. The council room is available.
This would be a work session, or would it be a public
This would be the
meeting?
planning commission meeting, just like we are here, just be on June the 12th, Monday the 12th. Again, the room is available. I'll have plenty of time to compile stuff that was potentially going to be on May's agenda, to put it onto June. It doesn't delay the meeting too far out for applicants that have projects in for review and approval. It also gives us an opportunity to revisit this ordinance as well at that time for more discussion, and possibly then if we need a recommendation for an extension of the additional 90 days, I can then take that back to town council for that request. And I think it has to go to town council for approval, correct, Tom? For that 90 days, or no? So the extension for potentially the ordinance that we're discussing, town council has to approve that request?
Planning Commission chair on behalf of the commission goes before the town, so once it's regular meeting.
Okay, which,
Okay.
which could be the July meeting.
I have one more question, I'm sorry.
All right. Well, I've got one too. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to get if everybody was okay with the June the 12th as the
I'm
revised
okay.
meeting. Once again,
I'm okay.
okay?
Everybody? All right.
That's okay.
Okay.
Okay, so June 12th it is.
John, quick question.
Sure, go ahead.
The charrettes, there are essentially 3 4-hour blocks. And is that basically, each one of those is attempting to be a time that would be available to whomever might want to attend?
Right,
You're
exactly.
doing the same thing?
Yeah, so actually, Saturday, the 20th, and Monday, the 22nd, are basically the same items in 2 different phases. So there's like an A and B part of those days. So there's like a 2 hours of A, and people, whoever comes, a portion would go to A, and then a portion would go to B. And then after that 2-hour mark, then it switches up, is my understanding.
And then the 7 to 9 on the 23rd, that's a wrap-up?
That's a final presentation with the modification, because they will, my understanding is they'll be doing modifications to the plan. And again, these items with the open space and that would be comments that should be presented to them at that meeting, saying, hey, we want connectivity, we want this. And thinking back to the plan really quickly, I know the open space on the east side is connected with trails to create that walkability within it and accessibility. But yeah, so that'll be the recap. I don't have the charrette material right in front of me, but.
No problem.
I know there's some concerns with that east side.
Yeah. I just
open
wanna-
space.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment too for the charrettes that we encourage, even though the Saturday and Monday are the same topics, we do encourage, if you feel like it, you can come to both. You can, do something on Saturday, then if you feel like you need to add other comments to other areas, please come on Monday or vice versa. So don't feel like you're just obligated to come to one of the meetings and voice your concerns or suggestions. That way we can most people can offer, concerns on various topics over the 2 days if they want to.
And I will let everybody know that will be attending, that they will be required to sign a code of conduct letter, that if you're not
Yes, that is good.
if you're not complying to that conduct, you will be asked to
That's
leave the
actually
meeting.
appropriate.
Hopefully, we don't have a reoccurrence of some other thing. And
Yeah,
it
there
might
were-
become a town council mandatory requirement ongoing, who knows? But anyway, just wanted to let everybody know that.
I have a process question, I think, for you, Tom. So with this hearing, with the O'Brien property, quasi judicial. So we're in the middle of the master plan process. And the argument is change or mistake. Isn't it since the last master plan process?
Correct.
So how can they be doing this before we're done?
Well, the last being
Oh,
passed in
okay,
2006.
okay. So as though they didn't apply this time, because they did.
Right.
Right. And it's not finished, but they did apply. So they don't have to wait this
I'm
way
sorry, I
out.
didn't hear the question I was being asked.
Oh, I'm sorry. It had to do with that we're in the middle of the master plan process, and the O'Briens applied for the zoning change.
Correct.
And we're not finished with that process.
Correct.
So they're sort of reverting back to this other thing. It just seems like procedurally, it's just kind of odd, but.
It's almost like they're reacting to, what our response was.
Well.
The non-favorable recommendation.
Yeah. But as you all pointed out to me, it's not done because we're not done with the process. It's not done until town council signs off on it.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think, like you're saying, I think an applicant can come in and claim change or mistake at any point in time, right?
Right.
I mean, it doesn't have to be during a master plan process.
Right. I mean, it was just because it's going back to the master plan process. That's what I wanted the clarification on. So
It's
the prior.
Current one that's in effect now.
Okay, the 2013. Okay, gotcha.
Item number 11, election for a planning commission chairperson. And possibly the vice chair.
Okay. I'll entertain nominations.
You running?
I'll run. But I will say, I think this may be the most adept group of planning commissioners that's ever been my experience to work with. And I'm about 12 years into it at this point. But folks, this is a good group. It's a very sharp group.
Well, I guess the question is, who wants it?
There you go.
I mean, like,
There you go.
I think you nominate somebody, and then they either accept the nomination or not.
okay, but I don't want to nominate someone if they're.
Well, they will deny the nomination if they don't want
Yeah, I
it.
get that, but.
Well, there's two opportunities here. One is, there's also a vice chair.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's only a matter of time. So that's a possibility too for anyone who wants to consider it. I'm probably in my last go-round, but, I would stick around simply to be the mentor as I could, but.
Steve, do you have a nomination at the present time? Brian Beta, do you have a nomination at the present time?
I think that Commissioner Gent would be a good example for everybody. And that Mr. Butts could be vice chair.
So I'm not sure, I would defer to Tom. If that needs a second.
Okay. I formally nominate Commissioner Gent.
Is a second required?
For chairperson of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay, I'm not sure. And then all in favor, or I guess, Mr. Gann, would you accept that nomination? Is that correct?
Yeah, we'd have to accept it.
Yeah.
That would be the next
Right,
step.
right, right.
If he says no, we'll go to the next person.
Yeah, for varied reasons, I'd like to deny that nomination. And, but I, however, show an aspiration to be the vice chair. I'm 8 months into this job, and I'm learning there's a great deal of history with regard to actions by the town. And so, with that regard and a few other volunteer activities that I have on a national level, so I really respect the nomination, but I'd like to deny it, but I would be most willing to be someone's vice chair to continue learning. Thank you.
Do you have a nomination for the chairperson position? Or do you have a nomination, Ralph, for a chairperson?
Yeah.
Since you denied the nomination, do you have somebody? That's how it's going tonight.
You skipped right over Bill and.
Huh?
There's no, it's random. I just started there because,
We're just going down the line.
Yeah.
Martina, do you have a recommendation for a chairperson?
Well, I mean, based on seniority, I would think Bill would be a good recommendation if he so chose to accept.
Okay, I would be willing.
Do we, procedure, so Ralph has indicated he would be good for vice chair, so we're still talking about chair. Yeah, okay. So do we want to,
Do you want to make a motion?
Has to accept it.
yeah.
I would
He
accept
said-
it.
Okay.
Okay.
It's a yes, and then you'd make a, who's in favor, I guess, right? We'd be doing a vote. Right, okay, so that would be the next step. Is there, Bill, do you have a nomination? Probably not, since you just accepted it.
Yeah, I would pass at this point.
Okay, Leslie, do you have a nomination for chair position?
No.
Can you self-nominate yourself?
Boy.
This is uncharted territory.
Okay,
Like
so I
it.
guess the question is, Bill's accepting. I guess we'll take a vote on if everybody wants Bill Butts as the vice, or as the chair position. Correct, no? Carl can run the room.
Ralph nominate anyone? Or did-
He denied.
No, not for himself, but nominate anyone for chair. Okay, just,
Steve? No? Okay.
So I guess the question is,
Do we want to take a vote?
I would take a vote, yeah.
Yeah. All in favor of Mr. Bill Butts being chairperson of the Planning and Zoning Commission? Say aye.
Please raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay? And then the next one would be for Ralph Gann as vice chair. Can we get a vote for that? Oh, I'm sorry, my bad.
Yeah. All right, I'll nominate Ralph Gann for vice chair.
You accept that nomination?
I'll accept.
Okay, can we take a vote? Okay,
Aye.
all right, congratulations.
Thank you.
or condolences, John, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah.
4-1, right, because you didn't vote for Bill, correct? Okay. 4-1. Deborah's just trying to make sure the record's straight.
Okay.
All right, Bill Butts, it's in your hands now.
Maybe for a
Wait a
little
minute.
while. But
Do you want to adjourn the meeting, Bill?
are we finished? Everything done?
That's it.
That's
All
it?
right.
Yeah.
Meeting adjourned.